Good afternoon. We're thrilled to have you joined us for today's book discussion, The Comeback, by Ms. Zaidi. We will be having a discussion and we'll be following it up with a question and answer round as precise as we could and as interactive as we could do it. The session will be chaired by Professor Anubha Yadav, Associate Professor, Broadcast Studies, Delhi University. We have her here. And in case if there are any interjections, you can obviously just approach the chair. So over to you, ma'am.
I was hoping that this would be actually a moderated session, but now that we have adapted, I'm also adapting, so be patient with me. Congratulations, Annie.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here, everyone. So largely, The Comeback, as some of you would know who have read the book, is a book which for me is perhaps Annie's placing the subaltern in a certain way. And before we start, could you in that context choose a paragraph and read it to us, which could contextualize the conversation in that way? Thank you.
Chali, I'm going to read a short, 3-4 pages from the book. For those of you who haven't yet read the book, I'll just put in some context. This is a story of friendship and arts and ambition and perhaps envy and all those things which people who work in the arts are familiar with. So what has happened by this time, this is from the 3rd chapter, what has happened by this time is that my protagonist, John K is telling the story. He has done something wrong and has antagonized and lost his best friend, perhaps his only friend, and who is no longer talking to him. Asghar is no longer talking to John, and John is desperately trying to get Asghar back into his life, but it's not working. So they have a third friend called Chiku, and Chiku is mediating sort of between them. I'll read out this section. When Chiku called me next, I was in the middle of a shoot, trying not to appear lecherous while holding up a piece of candy and lip syncing to a jingle that went, "Can't help myself, ta na 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 na." Chiku's voice was so shrill with excitement, I had to hold the handset several inches from my ear. Asghar, he yelled, has started a new theatre company, and it's not college theatre. It's theatre. Did I hear that? Theatre company. I distinctly recall feeling a peculiar sensation in my lower back, a tightness in my calf muscles. I could hear Chiku saying, "Hello? Hello? Are you listening?" And I found myself disconnecting the call. I would make up an excuse later, pretend the phone had run out of charge. In that moment, I couldn't quite trust the words that would come out of my mouth. "Pretty cool," I said later. "Typical Aggu move. You never know what to expect, huh? So damn cool." "He's the coolest, bro," Chiku crowed. I bit down on a note of irritation. It's almost as if he had a crush on Asghar, and I really wished he wouldn't say bro. An unkind thought popped into my head. How cool could theatre possibly be in a place like Masa? But aloud, I only said, "Keep me posted, cheeks." Chiku being Chiku, and also because he had nothing to do at the shop except accounting and some quality control, which he did by tasting his own goods, dutifully kept me posted. The minute he heard that Asghar had registered Act 2 Drama Company as a business, he wanted in. He counted out the day's takings at the sweet shop, pinched his ears apologetically before a photograph of his late father, and handed charge of the till to Bittu. Then he ran off to meet Asghar and offered to finance the company's first play, but Asghar turned him down. "Don't give me money, bhai," he said. "If you're serious about wanting in, help me make money." Asghar needed someone to handle marketing and ticketing, and if the company turned a profit in its first year, then Chiku was welcome to come on board as an equal partner. As Chiku relayed the conversation to me, the word profit made me laugh. Profit from theatre in Basa. For its maiden production, Shakila ma'am had stepped in as producer. Food, costumes and props were her responsibility. Her living room was the company office, and all parts of the house were rehearsal space. I was all too familiar with this mode of production. As college students, we had pooled our pocket money to buy biscuits and tea for rehearsals. We had no costumes that didn't come from raiding our parents' wardrobes, no sets that weren't made from fabric and cardboard. Like children selling raffle tickets at a school for a school fete, we went door to door, wheedling money out of people we called Chachu and Dadda and Auntie. Along with a ripple of nostalgia, I felt a surge of relief. It would be an amateurish venture, of course, but it afforded some opportunity for atonement. I texted Asghar, offering to put in an appearance in his play, lend my face and name to the event. He might sell a few more tickets that way. Asghar didn't bother to reply.
Actually, this is one of my favorite parts in the novel. Thank you for reading it. And I wanted to, there are various questions I want to lead to, but let's start with the one that comes first. When we were talking here, you said that a lot of this novel is part of nostalgia. And I think one of the major themes of the novel is nostalgia too. Nostalgia you mentioned as the writer, but there is also a lot of nostalgia which is situated, almost as a separate identity of its own, where there's this need to go back. John Kay has this need to go back to that space that was. Yeah. Can you talk about your nostalgia and nostalgia of the characters and how they transacted?
Yeah. Yeah, like my nostalgia is obviously for a different time as well, and also I've gone back to studies late in life, and I'm at university now, and it's been so long since I was back in the thick of things in college. And when I see student productions by other students, etc. Of course, I was nostalgic for the time when I was putting up student productions as an undergraduate. So there's a lot of that nostalgia. To be 17 again, to have hopes from yourself and the world again, which you can never go back to that time and place, right? You can never be 17 again. And you can never be naive again about the world, because at 18, even when your elders tell you, rubbish, like, not rubbish, correct things, but yeah, at the time it felt like they're constricting you, they're conservative, they don't know what they're talking about. When they tell you that, beta science pad lo, arts mat padho, you are thinking that, that their view of the world is narrow. But they're also being more practical, and even when they're not trying to force you into one thing or the other, even then they're very concerned when you say things like you want to be an actor. All parents kind of, unless they're themselves actors, that they completely freeze. They don't know what to do with something like that. Or a writer, for that matter, when you say that everybody is like, do something else.
Do something.
And now I'm the person who's telling people do something else.
What's your plan A?
What's your plan B, C, D? If you're going to work in the arts, you have to have not just a plan B, but a plan C, a plan D, even an E, if you can.
Oh, man.
So some of that is wanting to be that person again who believes.
Oh.
And the other part of it is also seeing that even if you make all the sensible, the practical choices, happiness is not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed either way. So you can take these two different paths, like Asghar takes the wrong path in the sense that against his own heart and his own will, he chooses to support a family and does the things that he doesn't want to do, etc. But he does it. But his life falls apart anyway. John Kate is the other thing. He follows his heart, he follows his passion, he throws all caution to the winds, he destroys lives along the way. But he isn't happy either. And both of these people have to find some middle ground for happiness, at least reach for happiness again. So there is the nostalgia for being young and slightly careless, slightly ambitious, all of that. But there's also the sensible part of being older and seeing that no matter what you do, a certain amount of unhappiness is a given. But a certain amount of desire for happiness and change is necessary. Otherwise, you can't go on. So it's a bit of both of that.
And what about, there is a lot of, I'll call him John because I love that name. Yeah. So a lot of John is about wanting to find that space of college. He's calling those friends in a moment in the book. Yeah, and everybody has found different lives. And they're very different from what that college life was. And actually that happens to all of us now.
All of us.
And there is a moment in your life when you realize that. Yeah, it's a very defining moment that we look back and that moment for me was very poignant in the book. And like, actually you spoke about that. So I just wanted to understand that need in him. There is this really dire need in him in that moment to again find that purity. Maybe it's almost pure for him, So can you talk about that?
I think with a character like John, it's very tricky because as much as he wants to reconnect with friends, he's also always angling to see what he can get out of people. So when he's calling a friend, some of it may be, tiny bit of it may be nostalgia, tiny bit of it may be that, back in the day we were like this. But the other part of him is like, how can this person be useful to me? So he's checking with them to see what information they have. How are they connected to Asghar? How much influence they might have on his life. So with John, it is that also, people like him are always, there are manipulative people out there. There are people who are roguish. He is a bit of a gentle rogue in many ways.
I love that about him.
He is, he's tricky.
Yeah, he's tricky.
So I think with him, it is that, but it is also coming to this understanding of, like in the arts, what is success?
Yeah.
Like if you're an actor, what is success? You are the lead in a Bollywood movie. That's your success. That's the pinnacle of success in the Indian imagination, at least. That Hindi picture mein hero banna, right? That is so he's maybe not hero, but anti-hero to ban gaya. So he's already been there. He's got what he wanted. And for 17 years, he struggled to get that one thing. Now he's got it. Now what?
Now what?
And now he realizes that there is a part of him which is an actor. And that part of him, the artistic part of him, the part that was trained in this small town, and he's worked in theatre 17 years. He hasn't wasted his time. He has put in the time. And being this person, he now realizes that there is a certain emptiness about having achieved this, because now what he's getting, he's being slotted, he's being bracketed, he's being offered more of the same. He's being cast again and again in similar roles, anti-hero roles, negative roles, boring roles, and he doesn't want that anymore. But the more he achieves artistically, the more hungry he also becomes for theatre itself. As there is something about theatre itself that is, for people who haven't worked in theatre, it's very difficult to communicate this feeling to them. They say theatre is an actor's medium, and they say it for a reason. It's because with films, you can save the thing on the edit table. If an actor's performed badly, you can cover it up. If a singer has performed badly, you can cover it up. You can add layers. You can say, okay, this was shot badly. I'll reshoot this. And the final product can still be. And that is why the films are called a director's medium. but the actor's medium is theatre. Because no matter how well a director has directed a play, when we're here live, right? When you're watching me live, if I mess up, you'll watch. You don't know what I've been told. You don't know what I've been taught. In this moment, there is just me, and you're watching me. And that feeling for an actor, it's a huge ego boost, right? And it's also a huge learning thing, how not to mess it up, how to cover it up when you sit. At that point, no producer, no director can save you. Only the actor can save himself on the stage. So I think there is also that. I don't know if I've successfully communicated that, but for a character like John, there are these two conflicting forces. One is standard ideas of success. He wants that, but he also wants this. And finally, between this and this wins over. The artistic compulsion is so great that it takes him away from, or at least maybe it doesn't take him forever, but at least it teaches him that this is also worth fighting for. The artistic argument, it is worth fighting for.
Yeah, but it is more than that, because he can do theatre with anyone. But he wants to do theatre with Asghar. Okay, there is this very erotic charge between them, you know.
Erotic charge.
Yeah, it's like he's yearning, man. He's yearning.
He is here.
And he's plotting like a lover.
Yes.
He's calling people, he's yearning, he's sitting at night thinking about him, he's drinking for him.
He's willing to fall at his feet.
Yeah. So what's happening here?
You know, I think many people have one primary relationship as young adults or as adults, apart from your parents, you know, your parents, siblings, it's a different thing. Most of us have one primary relationship. Sometimes you'll have one primary relationship serially, as in this will change and then it'll be someone else and some people have that one thing through their lives. Sometimes it can be a spouse. But I think in the case of John,
it's Asghar.
It's Asghar. It is the friendship and the mentorship and the sounding board, all of it. He was everything. He was friend, mentor, confidant, everything. And when he lost that, it was almost a shock too much to bear.
Yeah.
And there's also research now that shows that the breakup of friendships is often more heartbreaking than romantic breakups.
Yeah.
You recover from a romantic breakup easier. You're like, okay, didn't work out, move on to the next guy. But a friend is different. A friend dumping you is hard.
And we read so little about it.
We read very little about it.
Yeah, therefore this is so special. Yeah, I mean, and when you were writing them, tell me moments of writing them, this love story that's happening.
It is a kind of love story, isn't it? A different kind of love story, yeah. I had fun writing it. I think this has been the most fun and probably the only fun thing I've written. I mostly write slightly dark, depressing themes and topics, or at least people are angsty all the time and they're like not having a lot of fun in life. Both my fiction and non-fiction tends to be like that. This is the only kind of light thing I've written, and not even in a spirit of lightness. I think what triggered it was I read a profile of this new actor who'd made it a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, because these new series keep coming up and suddenly you're this hit, you know, nobody's heard of you, you've come out of nowhere. So I was like, oh, interesting new actor, he's come out of nowhere. And he shared a lot of detail about his life, growing up, whatever. And he also said some unsavory things. And I'm always interested by that when people write these tell-all memoirs and they, you know, and not just at the end of their lives, like at the beginning or in the middle of their careers, they do this. And I keep thinking, how do they do it? I have no courage to do that kind of thing. I would not say anything which would not only hurt me or my prospects, but my friends, my family. I think a lot about when I'm writing or saying something about the impact it might have. And when I read these things, I'm like, yeah, but what is your mom thinking? You know, have you thought this through? You're saying these things, everybody knows this about you, and you're a star, you'll get away with it. What about your mom who's still sitting in that small town? And she didn't ask for her life to be put out there like that, right? Have you talked about this? So when I read things like this, so that triggered the thought about what if there's a character like this who struggled a really long time, who has genuine talent, who perhaps deserves this break he's got, but then he's gone off and done this thing. And it is devastating for the other person, because that person is not a celebrity. He'll never recover from it. People will remember him as that guy, and which is what happens to us. But then I also thought, what if I turn this around, flip this around? Like, not just because in the real world, what is most likely to happen is that the actor would just go from strength to strength, success to success, maybe less success, maybe more success, but we would remember the actor and we would forget completely about the person he's hurt, right? That person would be like, we wouldn't even remember his name. And in my fiction, I wanted to change that. I said, what if we flip this? What if the actor becomes a non-entity and the non-entity becomes a bit of a star? Maybe a tiny star, but what if that happens? What if we actually had the courage to kind of look at this in this way? So I think a lot of the fun for me of writing it was that. The other part of the fun was also just every time, for example, when I talk about certain texts here, those texts haven't been adapted in the real world, in the way that I envision. But I'm also vicariously in my head watching those plays, right? I'm setting up those costumes. I'm setting up those sets. I'm choosing those locations. So on the page, I'm getting to do everything I want without having the money for it. So I had fun in that way too.
Interesting. And yeah, I mean, we have seen some stories, at least quote unquote Bollywood, we have seen Dil Chahta Hai, where, these tight male friendships are there. And it's a bond which is of a very special kind. And I mean, even Europe, we see those stories. I mean, there are far less similar stories about women. So did you ever wonder if this will be a story about two women? Was this a possibility? I'm not flipping it totally. I'm just wondering because it's just a world which is always, it's a world populated by men and which is fine. Yeah, but just wondered.
Interesting question. I think perhaps not, because firstly, I've seen very little theatre in small towns, but whatever little I've seen is still dominated by men. If it was two women, I don't think a female Asghar is unlikely, because I do kind of go a little bit into the gender politics of small towns and how that works. But a female Asghar would not have been possible in the masa of my imagination, not impossible either, but I think that I would have found it hard to imagine her pulling off the things and having the kind of support. The other thing is, with women, the loss of income is not such a huge thing. You are not castigated. You are not shunned in the same way. Success means different things for women. If you're married and have kids, that is enough. I mean, at least the way our society is right now, perhaps for a woman to not be married is a bigger sign of being unsuccessful in the ways of our society than for her to face any serious repercussions. So if I wrote a female friendship story, the repercussions would have to be different. And then because of that, then the repercussions would determine the choices she makes. And those choices would not necessarily be professional. Those choices would perhaps be much more in the morality domain then, and the breaking of the rules would have to be different. So this theater story would not have been possible. You can still write a friendship story, but I don't think you could write an artistic, professional kind of story.
Okay. So could we get a reading from that part? From the gendered part?
The gendered part. Oh, let me look for it. So what's happening in this part is that there's a famous play that Asghar Basi is the name of the other protagonist. He has managed to adapt this play, but he's struggling. In his first play, he manages somehow because most of his protagonists are male and he manages somehow. The second text that he's adapted is a little risky. There's always lots of flirtation, lots of cross-dressing, lots of people trying to suggest that it's sensual and, it's a little bit naughty. And he is trying very much to cast it. But in Basa, he can't get people. He can't get women to sign up. And February turned to March, and Basa's The Rover is the name of the original text that he's trying to adapt, remained uncast. There were 4 rounds of auditions, half a dozen readings, dramatic exercises about throwing voice in an amphitheater, but still no rehearsals. Chiku began to sound glum. At this rate, there would be no play, and he'd never get to be on stage. Then Asghar got busy with his BA second year exams, and there were no further updates. Yeah. So what's happened here is that because Basa, he can't cast them. Now, in this scene, his other friend, Lalit, and these people are talking. John and Lalit are talking. Now, can you imagine, I went on, what someone like Asghar would do with that kind of money? Well, you never know. He's doing his own experiments. Risky, I feel, much riskier than this multicultural experiment of yours, just not as expensive. Really, I haven't been able to catch up lately. What's he up to now? He's doing a gender bender, going back to old theatre traditions, he claims. What tradition? But I didn't need Lalit to answer the question. In a flash of intuition, I knew that Asghar was getting male actors to play women because he simply couldn't find any female actors. As experiments go, it wasn't a very bold move, given that he was doing it for the same reasons that folks did in the 19th century, and I said as much. But it's a real risk, Lalit insisted. What risk? It will appear more nautanki than natak, no? Nobody will take it seriously. It's the Rover, Lalit, I said. It's not a serious play. I haven't read the script, Lalit admitted, but yeah, this man is too much. Well, then it goes off into a different field. But basically what he does is that he does exactly what we've done in the 19th century in the past. He casts men in women's roles. But then he goes further than that, actually. When you read the book, you'll see that he doesn't just stop at that. He also just flips completely the idea of what women are allowed to do, what men are allowed to do in the script and in his adaptation and version of it, so that both men and women feel comfortable in this text without feeling like they are the burden of like being objectified or being kind of gotten and things like that in this text. So that's what it is.
Yeah, and also the couples, John and Azo, and Asghar and Zubi. There's an interesting play happening between them in terms of, how we perform our gender and our roles. Mm-hmm. And I'll first start with Asghar and Zubi. And there's this moment in the book where Asghar is pushing her to get a corporate job so that he can be and study and do theatre. Yeah. And it's a very, very tricky place in the novel where you're also angry with Asghar, when you're reading it. And it's very convenient. Now suddenly he wants her to work. Yeah. But at the same time, Zubi's answer, he says, if I die tomorrow, you will find a job now. I'm paraphrasing. And she says, the very quick answer is, if you die tomorrow, there will be no one to tell me what to do. And it was so unsentimental. And it was so refreshing to read that. So tell us more about how you wrote this couple.
Well, I wrote them in many ways like a modern middle class couple in urban India. Young women who are educated, and I think educated enough, like someone like Zubi could have taken up a job, had a career. Nobody could have stopped her. She chose not to. So having that choice has given her confidence, and it has also given her perhaps this sense that she expects things from the family, from the man, from society, whatever it is. It has also given her a little bit of entitlement.
Yeah.
And this confidence and this entitlement is in her, like, it separates her from her mother's generation. And, it might separate someone like us from our parents' generation. At the same time, I think this couple is unusual, perhaps in a little sense that they are very connected with each other. They understand each other. They look out for each other. He's surprised because he just expects that if he's dropped the ball, that she will pick it up. And she's like, doesn't work that way, not in my mind. So I think they're both pushed into these corners, and their relationship has never been tested. I think I also wanted to write a relationship where things have gone along, it's fine. You met in college, you got married, had kids, went wrong with average, typical urban middle class couple. Maybe not ideal life, but not too bad either. And then it is tested, and it is tested on the grounds of gender roles, of what is expected and unexpected.
And they're playing this really interesting game between what is traditional for the contemporary times, actually, and they're pushing and then they're pushing back. Both of them are somewhere in the middle on it, how they want to play the role of the wife and the husband.
Yeah, because Asghar is single parented, actually. He's been brought up by a single mom.
Yes, and a very strong woman.
A strong woman who's been quietly, confidently raising this kid. And, but there's also a thing, in our society, what's happening, it's very interesting. Lots of educated upper middle class women are falling out of the work scene, and voluntarily. By choice. And I have often thought about this. Why? I don't understand, because I come from a time where we fought for it a little bit, to hold on to our jobs, our right to have careers. And I know several young women are still anxious, even now, about if you get married, will you be asked to give up your job and things like that. And when you hear of women who don't want to work, maybe it was my curiosity also to write a character like Zubi. They're completely comfortable depending on either father or husband, and they just take it for granted that my place in the world is to do what I want. It's not even about what is expected of me, it's what I want. At this point of time, I feel like just baking cookies, raising kids and playing with my children. And who are you to tell me that I should get a job?
And there's no better self-care.
Yeah. So in some senses, it is also that she is that woman. But at the same time, I think in relationships, being there for each other emotionally is often harder than being there for each other financially. And she ultimately the relationship is tested emotionally. The gender and everything is.
Yeah, but Asghar is also being a bit of a bully now, because he can get away with it. I mean,
is he?
I think so.
Okay, all right.
Suddenly going to Bansa and becoming a theatre person was not in the marriage chart.
Okay, well.
Yeah, so moving on, place plays a very important part in in your work, actually. Be it your memoir, be it. So I wanted to add here this novel travels, though it's situated in Mansa. Its soul is in Mansa, but it travels all over the world. Yeah, be it the plays you're quoting, be it centuries that we are traveling through those plays, and be it the Bombay, of course, Lucknow, of course, and we are also traveling to Europe, and we are traveling to US, and we are getting to know the political economy of those worlds. Yeah, in terms of how artists constantly not only crave for a certain kind of attention from Bombay, Bollywood, but they also crave a certain kind of attention from the first world. Yeah. And that hunger is different. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit on how you moved through these worlds and the political economy that is there in these worlds in terms of art and theatre?
Yeah, so I've spent many years in Bombay. I went straight from college to Bombay. And actually, the confession is that I did want to also go to the National School of Drama. But then when I was fresh out of college, because I'd done these 2-3 plays, and your friends also how you were a bit, that, Are, this is what you should be doing. So you were also like, yes, this is my purpose in life. So I read the rules of what you need to get into the National School of Drama. And I was like, you should have worked in 10 productions already. And if not, you can join the repertory, etc. And I was like, I'm not from the kind of family that can afford to support me while I'm off doing theatre, whatever. So I'm also quite sensible and practical in that way. I said, okay, theatre dream, treat it like a hobby. So I would have been Asghar, actually, between these two. Like, I would have just done the sensible thing, find a job and do what is necessary. But at the same time, when I finally moved, I did move to Bombay, and Bombay is a big hub for theatre and film. And I think Delhi used to be, but so I often thought about why is theatre not exciting? I've worked in both places. I was a journalist here. I've been a journalist there in Delhi and Bombay. And I kept thinking, why is Bombay exciting and why is Delhi not exciting anymore, theatre-wise? I've seen plays in both cities. And I think what happens is that there was a time when theatre was very exciting here. There was NST. There were other experiments happening. So one, you need experimental theatre. Two, Bombay is a more multilingual city. It's not just English and Hindi. It's English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, and a few Tamil and this and that. So I think these things feed off each other. Actors from one come in. Marathi actors also work in Hindi theatre. They also work in English theatre. They can also do this thing. And they also do films. And they do TV. What has happened in Delhi is that there was no work. Once Doordarshan and all stopped commissioning things, there was no work for them. So all the talent, they get trained at NST, they move to Bombay. So all the talent is in Bombay. And when actors get bored of films or TV, they do plays, but they do it in Bombay. They don't do it in Delhi. And I've been thinking about plays and where does that leave place like Lucknow? Lucknow has a very tiny theatre scene. And then where does that leave places like Bareilly and Rampur? And what happens? What happens to theatre or even educational towns like Aligarh or, why is there no great theatre there? Also, the other thing is that when I went back to university, I was in England, and I was also teaching theatre part-time as a teaching assistant. I was also teaching dramatic texts. And if you see the way Indians have adapted Shakespeare is so much more exciting than, to me, as a South Asian, to see what Vishal Bharadwaj has done with Shakespeare's plays, for example, or even when people adapt it into Hindi, like theatre-wise, they see what can be done in that context. To me, that is so much more exciting than the original text, or even contemporary adaptations of Romeo and Juliet, for example. To me, Anishak Zadeh is more exciting than Leonardo DiCaprio on a beach spouting Shakespeare. So I thought about that too. Why is it exciting to me? Because this is my context. I know these people. The adaptability of a text and what it becomes when you put yourself into it. And when you have the talent to do that. To me, that was a very exciting thing too. To teach theatre, to teach a text, to know how to adapt it, and to know what it means in small towns. To, like the power of an Omkara is only there because we understand the Omkara setting, right? We know the texture, the landscape, the criminality of that particular place, the masculinity, what it means. You can't set that same story even in Bombay. Like the cultural difference is too much. So I wanted that rootedness to come through about how theatre is about place. It is the audience, right? It is as much. I mean, I've seen Japanese theatre in Bombay. It doesn't move me because I want to like it. There's a part of me that feels like I should understand it and it doesn't matter how esoteric it is. I should just rise to the challenge of liking and admiring this new way but actually, no, I need it I need perhaps some Bollywood type to take Japanese no theatre and do something that I recognize with it. So some of that is also this admission that art is influenced by place and art must adapt to place.
With the permission of the chair, may I ask a question? And then we can leave the floor for the panelists.
Give me a second. I'll just wrap up with one question.
Sure.
Okay. So, one of the most important themes in the book, which is running through the book, is capital, art and capital. And the struggle of the artist. And I think there is such little conversation, and I think this book, therefore, is really precious. There is struggle. We all talk about it over chai, and in the writing circles, this conversation is almost not there somehow. So we are also in theatre. I think theatre also has a certain kind of young crowd that comes from small town India. Writing has a very different so-called frame, where there's small town India is writing, but then it's writing for a very different so-called public, and their struggles don't even come anywhere. So there are two questions here. One, the relationship of capital and money in the larger context of the novel, art, but also writing. As a writer yourself, I mean, I really want to have a conversation here about capital and writing in your own personal context. So you said you're Asghar. Yeah, are you?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I don't have the courage of an Asghar. I would not be able to move
I think you do.
No, I don't think so. To jeopardize so much of your life, because for Asghar, this is also about recovering your sense of who you are in the world. It is not just about chasing dream or chasing art. It's about proving a point. It is about retaining and recovering the respectability, whatever respect society reckons. A solvent man. He wants to be a solvent man doing what he does. And the struggle is very hard. I think financially some things are harder for men. This is, you talked about the relationship between art and capital. Art is very hard for women for different reasons. When Virginia Woolf wrote A Room with a View, a room of her own, not a room with a view, a room of her own. She was talking about needing domestic space that was cut off from the rest of the household, right? Because even if you're a very rich woman or a middle class woman, if your husband can knock on your door every 5 minutes, or your children, you're expected to devote yourself 24/7 without a break to your children, or care of the elderly, or social events, just be a constant socially person, available person, you cannot be a writer. That is what she was saying. And I think that struggle remains across classes for women, even now. The emotional space, the social space, the physical space. For men, this is slightly easier. If they want to retreat to a corner of the house and shut the door, they might be given that space. But if they are not bringing home any money, it is much harder. And I think the way gender plays out in our society, a lot of male writers are actually subsidized by the spouses. Nobody talks about it.
Absolutely.
But the thing
also
is,
the emotional labor. How many of us get a wife to take care of us when we make art?
Yeah. But we don't talk about the fact that, say, a writer might be making some small money. He might have some celebrity status too. His wife will be the one who has a stable bank job or a stable teaching job. So we don't talk enough about this. At the same time, if a man is not a successful writer at all, and his wife is the one who has a job, his struggle will be harder, much harder, I think.
I can contest that, but not here. Later on chai with you.
Okay, all right. But I think a woman writing quietly, while her husband is supporting her in many ways, will not be socially vilified, while a man might be. Or people might say what we say in our, in UPS, they say, "Dabe labzon mein." Like, people won't tell him to his face that you're a useless man, but they will say that, he doesn't own anything, his poor wife, like she has to do everything. And as an artist, it cannot not affect you, right? Of course it affects you to know that everybody thinks you're a loser. And for women, that sense of loserness is not there. I think in many ways, I felt freer to become a writer. I quit jobs again and again and again. When I ran out of money, I went and got a job again. But when I had enough money to feel like, okay, now I can take a risk and write a book again, I would quit my job. Not one person ever said to me that, my God, except my mother, but nobody ever said that, my God, she's such a burden. But you know what I'm saying? That the gender politics of that. So in some ways, this is a little harder. At the same time, there is the capital problem of all artists as a community.
Yeah, and why don't we talk about it? Why do you think we don't talk? And also, because you are in theater and you are in this space where you know both spaces. Writing, we don't talk about it at all. Is theater talking about it? Because there is also Bombay, which is always more capital oriented. So do you think theater talks more about money? Writing, there are no conversations. I mean, we are here to just make art.
No, theater talks about it all the time. And I think the thing is that when you say we don't talk about it, I'm surprised because I feel like this is all I talk about. And now I'm tired of also talking about money because, how long will you complain? I've been complaining 25 years. Theater artists in Bombay don't survive off theater. They all have second, third, fourth jobs. So a lot of it is TV and film for the actors especially, but even for other people, they'll get small gigs, like the kind of stuff John does. You'll get a reading assignment or you'll get a audio work. There are voice artists, there are jingle artists, there are lighting gigs. Many people double up in theater. They'll do a little production, a little lighting, a little this, Jo Mila. You do all of that. A lot of them also do event stuff. Now they've started to do event stuff, organizing events and things like that. They make their money this way. Art is fitted in between all these little brackets. Like you have one check coming in, you make the calculation, okay, now I can do 2 months of rehearsals. And that's how it goes. And they talk about it all the time because they are producers, right? So they have their theater groups. They know how much money is coming in. India has no institutional support. There is no arts funding body. There is no arts council making the grants.
No residencies.
We don't have residencies. We don't even have the kind of Bombay does, but in places like Delhi, for example, like you don't even have like a listing where you say, okay, where to go for a weekend or just a Friday evening? Is there a nice play on? In places like London and all, there's always a play on. It's the capital city. How can you not have that? Delhi doesn't have that. Lucknow, the population of Lucknow is like, I'm sure it's more than New York. I'm not sure what the data is right now, but I'm pretty sure that it's more than New York. Where is the theatre? Many small towns in India have bigger populations than many so-called theatre capitals of Europe. Where is the theatre? We have our own languages. We have our own linguistic heritage. We don't have the spaces. We don't have people supporting it. Even for writing, I wrote one play. I made 750 rupees in royalty. I'm just saying this. And it was a Hindi play. And there was, obviously, it's a Hindi speaking country. So it's not for the lack of an audience.
It's very similar to writing then.
Worse. 750 rupees is nothing. It's, at least a book possibly gives you a slightly bigger advance than that.
Yeah, for
many of us, yeah. But so that is it. And then you can't ask for more money because you know that it's not like the artist, it's not like the lighting guy or the costume designer is getting paid a lot more. They're also making similar money. So then.
And therefore, this was so important because actually you go into the intestines of it. You actually give budgets. You actually say you show it. There's a visual map on how they are doing it, how they are making it the jugaad economy of theatre.
Yeah.
It just becomes so visible in front of us. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Ankita, it's here.
I think I can speak without this also.
You speak softly.
Okay, so I have not read it so far, but from the interaction that we had, I just have a few questions. First is, I think somewhere in the beginning you said that it's drawing inspirations from all the places that you have stayed and visited, like Delhi, Mumbai, and Lucknow. I just want to know how much of this is represented in your book. Like, what is the drastic similarities and absurdities you could see in theater, art, and expression of these three cities that you have ventured into? And what is it about their individual theater scene and culture scene that you feel that is extremely exquisite and has such a pool of talent to be used or maybe experienced by the public in large that we are missing out? Secondly, this is just drawing from your own, expressions while you were discussing about the characters not being women. I will not go into discussing Sylvia Plath and all of that because it's it kind of becomes very repetitive sometimes, I feel. But do you think that sometimes women are such complicated characters that their anatomy of being artist and being seen as nurturers is confused by people who think that women are going to be just how will be reacting to how society treats them? So, for example, if the society thinks, oh, you don't have a job as a writer, so you're not really missing out on something. You have a house, so you have a husband. But what about that woman that chose to be a writer despite the fact that she could have just been just a housewife? And that's a choice, that's fine. But possibly that drive to have a profession is so complicated for a woman to prove it. Like, women don't get it easy, not because the society doesn't put pressure on us. It's because maybe that women have to prove that we are more than what is expected of us. That situation where you have to prove constantly that you're just as good, if not better. So maybe if women characters are used in fiction, it could become more complicated. Like, if you might have seen that film with Natalie Portman, I'm forgetting its name now. She has won an Oscar for that. I kind of forget. The Black Swan. It is the most, gruesome way a woman's mind can work, and it is partly created by the society itself because of the lack of expectations. I hope I have not confused the questions. I have a lot to ask. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So the first part of your question, I'll begin with the second part because that's fresh in my mind now. The first part has got confused. I think when it comes to gender, it is true that women do have to prove more in the sense of in the professional world, especially. Are you good enough for this job? Can you handle both this and that? And all of that. That still remains. There's no doubt about that. But I think one of the things like the burden of patriarchy, why do we fight when we say in feminism, for example, that patriarchy is bad? It's not just bad for the women, it's also bad for the men. And why do we say it is bad for the men? Because it puts them in their own separate box, etc. So one thing I wanted to do with that book is also to toy with that a little bit, the expectations we have of each and either gender, the expectation husbands and wives have of each other, the expectations parents have of their children, and so on, and the disappointment that feeds into it. In this book, I would say that is what I was trying to do. In general, in life, I agree with you that also, we must not forget that I am writing about small town India, and in rural and small town India, particularly even now, the things women are not allowed to do are so many. Like I was a journalist, and I remember one of my first few assignments in rural India when I had gone outside of cities. There had been some kind of massacre, and I went to meet the villagers, and I am a woman, obviously, and I wanted to sit with the women and talk more to the women. The men would just say that, no, talk to us. You don't get to talk to our women. It was very clear. Women don't get to speak. They don't get to speak to outsiders at all. Even if they are the women, they don't get to speak for themselves. They don't get to speak for their communities. And this reality hasn't changed. There's no doubt about it. So that burden overwhelmingly of silence, of self-negation, of invisibility, is still on women, of making yourself small and surrendering space to men, not just professionally, but in every way, politically more than anything else, of surrendering the space of decision making. Most definitely, I agree with you that burden is still largely on women. What was the first part of your question?
That you have ventured into 3 cities like Mumbai
Yes.
and Lucknow, so I was just drawing.
Yeah. I have drawn on experience, but I think not consciously. A lot of it is just you live a certain life, then, like you were saying earlier, Deepali was saying earlier, the places you live in become part of you, right? So, I think in that sense that whatever little time I spent, whether it was in Delhi, whether it was in Lucknow, then moving to a new country and also seeing that, okay, this is how things are done here. And then feeling this mix of nostalgia and envy that, oh, they have Arts Council funding and we have nothing. And why do we have nothing? But also this little fantasy, so what? Even if we have nothing, we can do something. And maybe the government will someday fund theatre. Why not? I can write a novel about it, even if the government doesn't do it. Why can I not pretend? Because fiction is about pretense and fantasy and imagining things. So in my imagination, the government does help here a little bit, not a lot, but it does help a little bit. The culture ministry or whoever it is. And in that sense of space, see, I grew up without theatre at all, without any exposure to theatre. The only theatre I saw was in the little school where we ourselves did theatre, where your teachers are telling you, okay, Cinderella ka play bana do. So you take a fairy tale or a folk tale and you adapt it and you are the actors and your teachers are telling you what to do. And that was it. For up until the age of 17, almost 16 or 17, I had never watched a professionally produced play. So for me, writing this is also an act of recovery and an act of fantasy, where even in places like Masa, even in places where I grew up, small places like that, there is an option. that somebody somewhere is dreaming. And I'm sure there are people like that.
Yeah, Maligaon.
Yes, I'm sure there are. Superman of Maligaon. There are people who do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the...
Should we move towards open the panel? I think.
I wanted us to go back to the first question from where the discussion began. I want you also to comment on it.
Let Ani start.
Yeah. Firstly, I wanted to ask you, how did you contextualize subaltern within this novel? Because it's particularly interesting for me because I come from that discipline. So nowadays, anything and everything is becoming subaltern. So that is the concern. So I was trying to ask, how did that appear in your brain? Because it didn't in mine. And even that's very interesting for me to even contextualize it within subaltern aspect. And then how ma'am may respond to it is my question.
Largely in the context of how there is a constant need for him to, largely he says first play will be performed first in Bansa. Yeah, and constantly when he keeps going back to saying that, and he's ready to sacrifice everything for that. So the way I saw it was this very context being flipped, because there is Jean who's actually wanting to go global. Yeah, and here is he who's saying that the only way there is an assertion possible is if the subaltern rises from Bansa. It starts at Bansa. So that's the context I'm using.
Not consciously, not in that academic way of saying that I will create a subaltern character, no. And also in the sense, I don't really see Asghar Abbasi as a subaltern in that sense. He is not trying to... He's not oppressed in any way, actually, in a sociological sense. He is not oppressed in the sense of he's had the kind of education that everybody in Bansa has. And if life had not been disrupted, he would probably have gone on like any other middle class person. He is, in that sense, as Anubha says, representative a little bit of the subaltern to the extent that Bansa itself is subaltern. All power is concentrated in capitals. It's not just political power. It is also cultural power. Who gets published? And colonial power. Who gets heard and seen? So the invisibility of the people of Bansa, the invisibility of their artistic ambition and their talent, he flips that. He says, people here will get precedence. The economy here will get precedence. Our spaces, our talent, our way of looking at the world, you come watch us. We don't want to go watch you. And I think there is that there of...
It's actually pretty idealistic now. It is, and it's so romantic, and therefore you fall in love with Asghar na. वो जिद जो है, yeah, it's so beautiful, yeah.
जबकि मेरा पढ़ा हुआ नहीं है, तो I have not read it, but I think a part of Habib I can see Habib Tanveer.
Actually, I'm so glad you brought up Habib Tanveer, because we were just saying, people like, for example, Superman of Maligaon, whatever, theatre mein to Habib was that person. He went to rural Chhattisgarh, and Raipur is not rural, but he took what there was of the people, folk traditions, etc. He went abroad, he came back, so he is, in many ways, yes, he is somebody like an Asghar of his generation. Without some of the marital drama. But hopefully, you never know what goes on inside a marriage. But, and the sense of betrayal and all of that. Habib just chose. Asghar didn't choose. He was pushed into it. But when he is cornered, he becomes that. And which perhaps was what he should have done all along.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But then we all have a little Asghar in us.
It would be very good for us if we had a little bit of Asghar in us.
Yeah.
Don't you feel that at the end of the story that in the greater scheme, in the larger scheme of things, John actually did him a favor by screwing up so badly?
We got the artist. He created the situation in which Asghar didn't seem to have any other option in which to thrive. He would have remained a bank manager for the rest of his life. The creative Asghar may have been suppressed for all time.
I'm sure John would love to think of it that way. That, that it was me all along. That if it was not for me, how would any of this have ever happened? Yeah.
Talk about seeing the silver lining. Thank you.
Possibly. But I also feel like, I ended the way I do. But, like John says towards the end, if you go on telling a story for too long, the chances that it will end in tragedy are high. Because I have ended it on a note of triumph and reconciliation. Yes. But I could have chosen not to do that. So many things go wrong along the way. I have seen I've met so many taxi drivers in Bombay who came to the city to become actors. Yeah. Dozens, hundreds of them. So many who have been broken in some way and come back. So many who want to and are trying to do theatre and art in small places in India. They try for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they shut shop. So how long do you tell that story? If I end with the first great theatre production that a place like Bareilly does, for example, let's say a new star director emerges from a place like Rampur, and he's fine, he's educated, he's everything you want him to be. And he puts up this production that everybody's talking about. But then 5 years later, he can't afford to put up another production. So,
yeah, we don't know what happens.
We don't know how Basa will treat Asghar and his company in 5 years. We only know that at least this much was possible. These 3 years were possible.
Yes. I had another comment.
Yes, please.
So I was very intrigued by the title. So when I was reading through, firstly John gets his break. So I was like, okay, this is the comeback. And then Asghar goes back to his village, and then I was like, this is the comeback. So throughout the novel, there is this chain of comebacks happening in various degrees and various meanings. And the word comeback never occurs throughout the novel. So I was thinking, how did you come up with the title? Or what were the possible titles you might be playing around, and why did you choose this one?
I'm very bad at naming things. I have always struggled. I come up with obvious titles, boring titles that have not worked in the past with other books, lazy titles. One of my books was titled Love Stories number 1 to 14. I can't think of why was I that lazy. But when the publisher is asking you what do you want to name it, I don't know. I mean, the stories, I don't know. So I struggled a lot, and initially it was not called The Comeback, but in my manuscript stage it was called Asghar Goes Back to School. But then we thought about it, and we discussed some things with the publishers, and some things I talked to my friends, and they're like, nah, doesn't work. It's sounds like a young adult novel, like a kid.
Yeah. This makes it more.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, okay, Asghar Goes Back to School might be a 13-year-old coming back after the summer vacation, So I sat and brainstormed a lot. I have my friend Saif to thank for this, because I just said, give me options, so we also had to do a lot of Googling to see what is already taken as a title. You can't have a book of the same title. So came up with this and that and this and that. And then we came back to, okay, what is came back to? So I was playing with the idea of giving someone what they deserve, because in a way, both John and Asghar get something what they deserve in both positive and negative ways. And I Googled synonyms and comeback came up. It's a very silly answer, but yeah, just you have to try everything to come up with a good title. It is so difficult.
The sense is very similar to Prelude to a Lloyd also.
I did not call it Prelude. I called it Prequel. My publishers made me change it to Prelude because
It sounds beautifully musical.
and
Wasn't?
yeah, prequel firstly isn't musical. Secondly, I was told it's not even a word. It's like it's a made up word, like prepone and postpone. Yeah, so
Made up words become words if they exist in a
they kind of do, but they were like, this is clunky. It was clunky and heavy, but at the manuscript stage, I had called it prequel and not prelude. So thankfully, sense prevailed at the right time, and somebody got me to change it. Yeah.
Do we have more any inquisitive questions?
I have just an observation in the sense that theatre is a universally romantic, area or ecosystem. It has a certain ecosystem. It's absolutely romantic. And whereas, so I do not know because I have not read the novel. I'm just commenting on the way it is being used and this device being used. So, how expansive is the romanticism in that sense when we look at your novel, number one, number two, because you tried or experimented with theatre. So how much is that, relationship which exists in this novel?
It's quite romanticized.
So that's why I said King Cotton.
For the good of theatre.
It is a romance in that sense, or you can say it is both a romance and a bromance, but in many ways it's also an anti-romantic view of theatre, because like we were saying,
It's also deconstructing.
it is also about the making of it, the how do you find space for theatre in a town where nobody does theatre? What are the physical spaces available to you? How can you creatively reinterpret them, reuse them? Where can you do theatre? You can do theatre anywhere. You can do it on a nukkad. You can do it anywhere. We know that. But in this context, how do I make my protagonist fight the lack of space to take it out of only academic institutions and then say that, no, this is commercial and I will do it my way. So in that sense, it is unromantic. Not unromantic, but anti-romantic, the view of theatre, a real view of theatre. But there is romanticism in the relationships people have with each other. And if you have done theatre, you are still part of these artistic circles. So without some romance and some jazba and a little foolishness, you can't do things, you can't make art, you can't. And you need so much solidarity. You need the guy who's not making any money, but for 700 rupees, he'll come and do the light rig for your show.
And the chiku who gives samosa.
And you need guys, so many people whose parents are giving them biscuits and tea and, offering the drawing rooms for rehearsals and things like that.
In Jamia, it was Maulana ki canteen. I've documented it, in fact,
Yeah.
That idealism, is there in the novel. And in the end also, because I've read Annie's other work, I was very surprised by the end. I was like, oh, Annie has given us a very uplifting end. I was in shock. For 5 minutes, I just sat there. I was expecting doom.
But I also wrote it to cheer myself up. So much has gone wrong with the world in the last 5 years, particularly. I mean, after COVID, I hadn't seen a play for so long. Like after COVID, 3 or 4 years, and all my adult life, I have always been part of literary circles, artistic circles, going somewhere, checking out this show, checking out that show. I was missing that sense of fun and solidarity, but also I was just missing something that is slipping away from us very quickly. This idealism, this sense of fantasy, the sense of possibility that we can do so much and that we must do things and change the world and change our hometowns and we'll go back and change everything.
Let's not be practical.
Let's not be practical. So in some sense, it was also me trying to give myself hope that if I cannot, even briefly, even within the space of a novel, if I cannot give myself this little hope, then how are we to go on?
Thank you for giving us hope, Annie, to the comeback.
Mm-hmm.